The podcast you're listening to is part of the Second Union Podcast Network. You can listen, like, and subscribe to all our podcasts by heading over to wearesecondunion.com. Thank you for listening.
Welcome to the X-Perts, your exceptional guides to all things X-Men. I am Jeremy.
I'm Joanna.
And I am Jesse.
We are doing this show in conjunction with Second Union. For more of the latest headlines and entertainment, please go to our website at wearesecondunion.com. You know, I'm a regular reader of X-Men books, and I picked up the first issue of Cable, the new series about the kid version of the Time Traveler.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I knew I expected something weird. I didn't expect the young man to be as much of a flirt as he is. He flirted with Armor. There's every indication that he's not dating one, but all five of the Stepford Cuckoos.
Oh, no.
Wow.
I know. That's a dare, right? Also, I can't imagine how Cyclops would respond to his son dating Emma Frost's daughters. That feels dangerous to me.
Since he got with Emma, too.
Yeah. But Pixie's going to be part of the book, and I don't know if she's going to be like another Paramore or she's just going to be like the light of positivity in the book. No, what I really didn't expect was at the end, because in the epilogue, it appears that someone is going to be looking for young Cable. And that's old Cable.
Oh.
Yeah.
He's alive.
Well, time traveler, so I don't know exactly what that means. Think in Doctor Who terms. I don't know where along the timeline this character falls in at. You know?
Yeah.
It's like CBR is saying, they brought old Cable back. It's like, what do you mean brought back? We don't know if this is another part of Cable's life. So, that really kind of threw me for a loop. Excalibur dealing with werewolves again threw me for a little bit of a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually kept one. They found a baby werewolf before they killed all the others, and they've decided to take this one back to Krakoa.
Oh, no.
What could happen?
Well, I don't know, because them adopting a werewolf is not the strangest thing. I mean, remember, the X-Men had a student for a while that was an adolescent version of the Brood, so they've had stranger things hang around. But what really surprised me was who agreed to take care of this baby werewolf.
Magic?
Rachel Summers.
Oh, that makes sense.
Oh,
The
Alright.
the person that the original werewolves were introduced hunting in the very first Excalibur comic. There's something kind of odd about that. And it's also funny that when Betsy hands this thing over to Rachel, she just says, "Oh, I'll take care of it. You really need a job."
Oh, damn.
Like puppy?
Which seems like an odd lead-in, considering in the next couple months she's supposed to be in the first issue of X Factor. So it's like, okay, cute. You know, now I wonder if this baby werewolf is going to be a part of it. And speaking of the Brood, they've invaded Earth again.
Again?
Yeah, this actually ties into other things. I'm finding that the X-Men's current series are all amazingly interconnected. It's like 1992's Image all over again.
Nice.
Because if you remember in the first issues of the New Mutants, the original New Mutants went into space with the Starjammers, who didn't tell them they were raiding a station for some kind of object.
Mm-hmm.
Which the New Mutants grabbed instead of letting the Starjammers get away with it, if you remember. Some kind of weird orb, right?
Right.
Wolfsbane brought it back to Earth with them. I don't know why she was allowed to keep it.
Why?
I don't know. But she thought it was pretty, and it was a keepsake, so she kept it.
It was shiny.
Yeah, but here's the thing. It turns out that thing they're looking for, the Starjammers are still on the hook for. And an accuser wants it.
Ooh.
Which one?
A Kree accuser. I think it's not Ronan, it's somebody else. He's the person who contracted the Starjammers to steal this thing.
Oh.
So they weren't doing straight piracy, they were doing merc work.
Gotcha.
Here's the problem. It's known as a king egg.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
A brood king egg.
Oh, no.
Now, I don't know how much you or anybody listening knows about the Brood, but the Brood are a lot like xenomorphs in the Aliens movies.
Yeah.
There's a queen that lays eggs. These things can attach themselves to human beings, and they will overwrite them and turn them into Brood. In the case of mutants are kind of highly sought in the Brood hierarchy because anybody they infect, not only do they turn them into Brood, but the Brood keep the mutant powers of the host.
Exactly.
Now, the king egg evidently is an overriding thing when it comes to the brood, because queens are born for several sexes or hives throughout the galaxy. A king egg is something that hatches once in a generation. Something that can unify the brood. So they have come looking for this thing. And right now it's with the New Mutants on Krakoa. You can imagine what came down to find it.
Yeah.
So Scott Summers' plan is to take the brood egg via Krakoan portals to the moon, where he has another one of those Shi'ar scout ships waiting.
Mm-hmm.
And they are going to take off with it and hopefully lead the brood away from Earth. And on this ship is a few X-Men that includes Cyclops, Havoc, and their brother Gabriel.
Oh, wonderful.
Remember the half-mad guy that was the king of the Shi'ar Empire for a little while?
Yeah.
Yeah, here's the thing. If all this wasn't complicated enough, the Shi'ar Empire has detected a Kree ship in their galaxy for some reason. In their territory, I should say.
Uh-oh.
And they know there's an accuser on board, and he wants something very badly. So the Shi'ar have contacted somebody who was supposed to be on vacation hunting with his son, who's hunting brood no less,
Of course.
to ask him to take a look as to why this Kree ship is in their territory.
Oh boy.
They're asking Gladiator and Kid Gladiator to find out what's going on.
I was about to say their names.
So you've got a whole lot of parties about to crash head-on over this object that I'm sure Cyclops is just thrilled to get rid of.
Meanwhile, on the other half of Marvel,
Right?
Like I said, it's all very well interconnected. I'm entertained by this, but you do have to follow a few series to get the breadth of what's going on. Otherwise, it just seems rather disjointed and weird, I'm sure. You know, and I think Boom Boom's still drunk, but that's neither here nor there.
Probably.
I'm not going to comment on it because I'm just going to say something mean and out of turn. But none of the mutants we've talked about so far are the one that is the subject of our review this week. This week on the X-Perts, we're going to take a look at a character usually thought of as support for the X-Men. His name is Madison Jeffries. And Madison has been around for a moderately long time. His first appearance was in Alpha Flight number 16 in 1984. That's back when Alpha Flight was still a relatively new entity in Marvel Comics.
Wow.
He was created by John Byrne, the artist who was the guy who did the Dark Phoenix saga.
Mm-hmm.
And I know John Byrne doesn't do a lot of signings. I would still love to get a signature from this man, whether it be on my book or on my comic books, because his art was present during so many seminal moments in X-Men history. I feel like it just should happen, but for those that don't know, Byrne does not like doing comic book conventions.
What's that?
I don't know. He seems to have some kind of major beef with Marvel that is not very well explained. When it comes to what he doesn't like, he's very private about it. He doesn't tend to like bloviate and put things out just for people to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he holds it in. And he hasn't done too many comic books outside Marvel. I get the feeling there's some kind of 8-ball or blackballing going on from prior Marvel editors-in-chief that has never quite been worked out. You know, there's always the feeling that there's something extra happening that that neither side will expand upon.
Mm-hmm.
So if he ever comes out in my area, and by area I mean not just within California, if I find out he's in like Washington, Oregon, Arizona, Nevada, or even Colorado, I might just rent a car and hop out there just to try and get a signature. You know what I mean?
wow.
Heck yeah.
But yeah, 1984 is when the character first came out. Madison Jeffries was a soldier in Vietnam alongside his younger brother Lionel. And Madison had already manifested mutant abilities by then, and that ability was to restructure non-organic materials, metal, glass, and plastic. So he can reshape them at will. Lionel had abilities to reshape organic matters, and he could use it to heal wounded soldiers. But Lionel attempted to use his abilities in a moment of grief on dead soldiers, and the results were less than ideal.
Zombies.
I don't quite know. I've never actually read the origin story of Madison Jeffries myself. I'm getting a synopsis here. Unfortunately, because of what happened, Jeffries' brother went insane. Madison had to use his own inorganic restructuring powers to bind Lionel. And Lionel developed a new persona and a new identity as Scramble, the mixed-up man. He was committed to a psychiatric ward in Montreal General Hospital, and Madison left the military after that. After this point, Madison met and befriended a man known as Roger Box at a clinic for physically disabled persons. Box is another Alpha Flight member eventually, and Box was missing his legs from the knees down. He was used to ambulating in a wheelchair. The two of them actually became friends over a period, and Madison used his mutant powers to reshape metals to help Box create his first robot, which was known as Box. Roger's last name is spelled B-O-C-H-S. The robot is spelled B-O-X. The two of them combined were discovered by James McDonald Hudson, who a lot of people may know as Weapon Alpha or Guardian. Do you guys know James Hudson's history in Marvel Comics?
No.
Mm-mm.
He's rather important because not only is he the leader and one of the founders of Alpha Flight, but he is the man who found a very strange hairy savage in the middle of the Canadian wilderness, and he and his wife Heather nursed that man back to health. However, he had significant memory gaps for unknown reasons, so they just kind of named him Logan.
Oh, different hairy guy I was thinking about.
Okay. But, yeah, now Madison and Box were recruited into the Alpha Flight program. Department H determined that Madison should remain in the third-tier program, one of the training programs for Alpha Flight called Gamma Flight. Box and his cybernetically controlled robot Box, which was controlled by a headset at this point, reached the Beta Flight level, which meant they weren't quite ready for the field. Madison also had an on-again, off-again relationship with another character in Gamma Flight, also another mutant named Diamond Lil. We've discussed Diamond Lil a little bit. She had a high degree of strength and vulnerability at the cost of tactile sensation. She couldn't feel the world for the most part. The two of them would drift apart, especially when the Canadian government cut the Department H funding. Department H was the, I guess you could say, the super special section of the government that controlled Alpha Flight. After Gamma Flight was cut, Madison went and started digging ditches for a living. Madison's life is unexpectedly hard. So, Madison kept on with his own regular life. Meanwhile, Box and Diamond Lil were recruited by a character known as Jerome Jackson. Jackson was a friend of the Hudson family, but he decided to form his own group of superpowered characters as enforcers. He called them Omega Flight. And he had one of those very 80s villain type of mentalities where he didn't just want to take over the world. He wanted specifically to destroy James Hudson, who was taken on the mantle of Guardian and leader of Alpha Flight. Box accepted the offer not of Jerome Jackson. He accepted the offer of another character named Delphine Courtney, who was Jackson's assistant, who, unbeknown to everybody at that point, was an advanced android. Box didn't even accept the offer to be a part of the team. Box was a spy on behalf of Guardian. He was trying to watch Jackson and Omega Flight. Eventually, though, Jackson stole the headset that controlled the Box robot and used it against Guardian in battle. Unfortunately, Jackson wasn't well suited to the controls of the Box, and as it was fighting Guardian, he was electrocuted by a feedback loop. Guardian used his own suit's energy to disable the robot. As a result, though, the exosuit that Guardian uses to, I guess, be a superhero would be the right phrase for it, malfunctioned, and the power pack overloaded. It exploded.
Oh.
I mean, in the original story, yeah, James Hudson was dead. He was a smoking pile after that. It was later retconned where the experimental power pack ended up throwing James Hudson through time and space. So he went from being Canada's Iron Man to being Canada's Doctor Who. It was a pretty traumatic moment, though, because when the power pack went off and in the original story, Hudson burned to death, his wife had just opened the door to the room.
Oh.
Yeah. So Alpha Flight returned to Canada. Box was still working independently, Roger Box, but he joined the Alpha Flight team, and he recruited Madison to help rebuild the Box robot. And he had Madison help him do this specifically to gear the box robot to go up against Omega Flight. They used a new thing that they called living metal, which allowed Box to physically merge with the robot. So in other words, he's no longer piloting from remote. He can more or less merge with the robot in a strange way and pilot it from within. So Roger,
like a mind meld?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, more like an actual physical meld. Box is now within the robot. It also helped Box walk, obviously. He no longer has to worry about his physical limitations. So Box did all the physical work while Madison stayed behind. And Roger joined up with Alpha Flight. But there was also kind of an issue, because in between all this, Walter Langowski, who's also known as Sasquatch, died. Except his spirit was still somehow roaming free. Because of Langowski's spirit running around, Box donated his Box robot so that Langowski could inhabit it for a time being. The whole thing was very strange.
Very.
That wasn't the weirdest part of it all, because Snowbird had lost her mind, and when I say lost her mind, her body was just kind of there, comatose. And Walter needed something more permanent than the Box robot, so he shifted his spirit into Snowbird's body and started calling himself Wanda Langowski. And he would use Snowbird's unusual abilities to transform into different animals of the Canadian wilderness. Instead of transforming all these different animals, he just kept having her shift back and forth into a Sasquatch-like form. So Walter, as Wanda, became the regular Sasquatch for a while.
Huh.
I know. Comic books, right?
Yeah.
Retcon and time travel. It's like they do that all the time.
Yeah. But not long after Walter inhabited the Box robot, Guardian reappeared. Everything seemed okay, and Alpha Flight was astonished to see him alive. But this Guardian was actually the android, Delphine Courtney, reconfigured to disguise itself as Guardian. And acting as Guardian, Delphine Courtney led Alpha Flight to the West Edmonton Mall, where they encountered Omega Flight. They were looking for revenge as well as to recover a member that Omega Flight had lost, known as Smart Alec. It was a guy with a helmet that expanded his cranial capacity and his intelligence. However, the whole smackdown was interrupted in a very unexpected way when the Beyonder dropped in the middle of them. The Beyonder is a member of a race of omnidimensional beings, would be the right word for it. They inhabit different times and space. One of the Beyonders, I believe one of the Beyonders started the original Secret War. But Omega Flight, being led by Courtney, disguised as Guardian, ran into Madison Jeffries, who was still in the parking lot. And Madison used his inorganic transmutation abilities to keep the Omega Flight member Flashback away from him, and he accidentally killed one of Flashback's future selves at that point.
Oh no.
Then he turned to Courtney, and his abilities he found was able to reach this Guardian for some reason, and then he used those abilities, and mind you, Courtney may not be organic, but she's still technically a living being, right? Because Courtney's made entirely of metal, and at this point Madison didn't have as much respect for AI or artificial beings, he turned Delphine Courtney inside out.
Ooh.
Oh.
Also, a member of Omega Flight at this time is another character known as Diamond Lil. Madison continued to fight Omega Flight and helped subdue the entire group. They turned all of Omega Flight, including Lil, over to the authorities. After this, both Madison and Roger Box helped to reconstruct the interior house of Walter Langowski into a pseudo-headquarters for Alpha Flight, which, again, is not part of the government at this point. The reconstructed house is now called Mansion Alpha, and Heather Hudson has taken over leadership of Alpha Flight during this period. She kept researching her presumed dead husband files on Madison Jeffries and discovered the existence of his brother, Lionel. Remember Scramble, the mixed-up man? That is a horrible name.
It is.
Unfortunately, the database that Hudson originally built on all the Alphans did not mention that Lionel was crazy. So when Heather Hudson traveled to the hospital to where Lionel was, she was surprised to find out that he was a patient and not a staff member. And then she accidentally allowed Lionel to use his abilities, which he used to free himself, and disfigured Heather Hudson in the process.
Ooh.
So Madison has to track down his brother and confront him again. And this time, Madison forced Lionel to use his powers upon himself, which actually allowed Lionel to regain some of his sanity. At this point, Madison and Roger recreated Guardian's battlesuit from the remains of Delphine Courtney, which, again, it's the 80s. It may not have seemed as bad, but in current context, it seems really creepy.
It does.
You're peeling an inside-out robot to try and get the technology she used to masquerade as Guardian.
Yeah.
Yeah. Heather Hudson actually hated this project, not because of the moral implications, but because she saw that suit as the reason why her husband died. It's a little bit of a step, but I figure losing your husband would create some trauma, and you would bridge some things in your brain that you may not do otherwise, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But after the Scramble incident and being kidnapped by another character known as Deadly Ernest, Heather decided to use the salvage battlesuit to lead Alpha Flight in the field. So Madison used his metal reshaping abilities to make this battlesuit fit Heather, and then she took on the name Vindicator, which I believe was a name that her husband used for a little while before he settled on Guardian.
Okay.
Madison stayed with Alpha Flight in a support role, and he kept applying Roger Bach's designs, as well as a few of his own after learning from Roger's designs. And he created and repaired Alpha Flight's equipment, including their mode of transportation known as the Omni-Jet. After this, Madison started to step into the larger part of the Marvel Universe because he was kidnapped by another character who's related to someone super famous in Marvel Comics. Her name is Kara Kilgrave.
Oh.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he was kidnapped by the Purple Girl, the first child of Zebediah Kilgrave, the Purple Man. She was fearing reprisal from Alpha Flight because at this point she had manipulated a character who was part of the original Alpha Flight but was not part of the team from the timeline we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That's North Star.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I know North Star.
The thing is, though, Madison kind of felt for Kara because he felt like she had been misunderstood and mistreated. So he convinced Alpha Flight to go easy on her, and he adopted her as a sort of quasi-daughter figure. Kara would actually look up to Heather as a mother figure while she's a member of Alpha Flight, and that may have contributed to a period where Madison Jeffries and Heather Hudson had a romantic relationship, because they had a common familial interest, more or less.
Interesting.
After this, Lionel Jeffries, Madison's brother, became the head of the New Life Clinic, where he used his mutant powers to heal injured members of Alpha Flight. Unfortunately, remember how the use of Lionel's powers on himself helped cure part of his insanity?
Yeah?
Well, it didn't do all of it, because while he was working at the New Life Clinic, he started experimenting with his powers again.
Uh-oh.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Madison became suspicious of this because during one of the treatments at New Life Clinic, Roger Box severely lost a lot of body fat, and he also somehow got new legs. See, Box was also interested in dating another member of Alpha Flight. He wanted to date Aurora, North Star's sister.
Mm-hmm.
Lionel's powers also had no effect on the recently revived Sasquatch, who was in Snowbird's body. Because remember, Snowbird is pretty much a demigoddess.
Yeah.
She's not entirely organic. Also couldn't affect a strange illness that had gotten into North Star, which was causing a lot of doubts in the minds of other Alpha Flight members, especially Vindicator. Now, Box still felt threatened because he wanted to date Aurora. However, Aurora's ex-boyfriend, Walter Langowski, is still hanging around in Snowbird's body.
Creepy.
Something else was happening that wasn't helping Roger's mindset. His new legs were deteriorating. I know, you're wondering like me. Was it made out of his body fat? Is that how he got new legs, right? Unfortunately, the legs that were grafted onto him, they were from corpses that Lionel picked up.
Oh.
Yeah.
Frankenstein-y.
Yes. So Roger he went pretty batty with jealousy. He merged with the box robot again and attacked Sasquatch directly.
Ooh.
Unfortunately, someone else was injured in the crossfire, and that was Kara Kilgrave.
Of course.
So Madison had to defend the rest of the team against the box robot and used his abilities to forcibly remove Box. He pretty much ejected him from the robot. And then Madison took his first step into combat when he jumped into the robot's body instead. The technology that allowed Roger and the Boxbot to merge were not exactly... they're not targeted directly to Roger. Any individual can merge with it if necessary. And unfortunately, Box, in his grief and his paranoia, thought that this was Madison's plan all the time, to take the box robot from him. Box went back to the New Life Clinic, where Lionel would physically use his powers to merge with Roger to become a new life form he called Omega. There's a lot of Greek letters in this series.
Yeah, a lot.
The new being, Omega, devastated Alpha Flight, using Lionel's metamorphic abilities combined with Roger's ability to design.
Mm-hmm.
But Madison had picked up enough of Roger's skills while working together. He used them to reconfigure the box robot on the fly while he was inside it. So this pretty much started an era where Box wasn't just a muscle character. He wasn't just the strength. He could start transforming the body of this thing from the interior to create all kinds of unusual weapons for it and forms.
Interesting.
It pretty much became a robotic changeling.
Mm-hmm.
So, Madison was able to reach what was left of Box's personality and sanity within Omega. And he was able to... Basically, between him reaching Box and Box resisting Lionel's insanity, kept Omega still long enough for Madison to turn the Box robot into a cannon and destroy the Omega entity.
Oh, fun.
So this is the end of both his brother and his best friend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. After this, Alpha Flight lost a number of members, and the team consisted primarily of 3 people. Vindicator, Box, and by that I mean Madison Jeffries and the robot, and Sasquatch. These are the only veterans left. Meanwhile, they have several junior members with them. The Purple Girl, a character named Mannequin, who can manifest different versions of his ancestors. A giant protozoa, a Neanderthal-like savage, and something from the future. There was also a character known as Goblin, who was just it is what it sounds like. It was a young girl who was just a thrashing goblin. And her twin sister, Pathway. There was a misconception before that people thought that Goblin would transform back and forth from a human girl into her more feral form. But it turns out the two of them were twin sisters, and somehow in the womb, Pathway recognized that her sister would not be recognized as human and used her abilities to send her into an alternative dimension. The two of them would just kind of unconsciously trade places. Eventually they figured it out and the two were on the same team.
Interesting.
The entirety of this new team was captured by Bedlam, which was a failed creation of Department H. And Madison Jeffries teamed up with Wolverine to defeat Bedlam and save Alpha Flight. After this, Alpha Flight was attacked by the Great Beasts, which were kind of beasts from the... mythical beasts of Canada would be the right way to put it. Box used Bedlam's Arctic base to increase his own size. He used the mass of the base to increase his own size to battle the monster known as Tundra directly.
Mm-hmm.
After this, Box was discarded with a lot of the matter absorbed from Bedlam's base, including... and they used it all to launch Alpha Flight into deep space. The Box robot formed the starship that they used to fly at this point.
Huh.
Alpha Flight eventually came back to Earth by the way of the Dream Queen's dimension, and I don't know what that is. During this period, Madison and Heather actually produced a romantic relationship, and the two were engaged not long after they returned to Earth and disbanding Alpha Flight. The engagement, though, was a very, very difficult one because the Dream Queen and Leon the Sorcerer forced Alpha Flight back together, and it didn't give Heather and Madison a lot of time to explore their romance during this time, right?
Mm-hmm.
During the last fight with the Dream Queen, Diamond Lil, also known as Lillian Crawley, came back into Madison's life. She'd been paroled by Canada. And as part of her parole, she was working with the new Canada official super team, Gamma Flight. Gamma Flight ended up working side by side with Alpha Flight for a short time. But during this period, Madison also admitted that during the final fight with Leon the Sorcerer, Madison reaffirmed the love he had for Heather. And adding to all this was the sudden reappearance of MacArthur Hudson, Guardian.
Mm.
As you can imagine, when your husband comes back to life, you're suddenly not too concerned about your fiancé.
Yeah, that can be quite awkward. When you said, oh yeah, they got engaged, I was like, until what? What happened? Because that was always the way. It was like 90s angst. And it was like Spider-Man, when he finally married MJ. Oh yeah. Not anymore. Just kidding. They're not married.
I don't want to talk about One More Day. That is, oh, wow, that is one of my most hated storylines in all of comics.
Oh, I have so many reasons for hating. Anyway.
Well, because of the fight, Alpha Flight was now recognized as the official Canadian government super team again. Mm-hmm. And not only was Alpha Flight allowed back into the government, but both Madison Jeffries and Diamond Lil were put on the Alpha Flight roster. And Madison provided support for Lil after she discovered something unusual. She had a lump in one of her breasts.
Uh-oh.
This is an actual comic book storyline. And
really?
Yeah, the breast lump was very problematic for a character like Diamond Lil because, again, she had high invulnerability. The density of her skin, or the tensile strength of her skin, I should say, was compared to diamonds, hence the name.
Mm-hmm.
How do you remove the lump of a woman who's practically invulnerable?
Use a diamond to cut a diamond?
She's been known to be resistant to that.
Well, lasers?
Yeah, that's the thing with current technology, even at the super science level of Marvel Comics at the time, they couldn't even perform a biopsy on her.
Well, Pym, go smaller than the particle, get underneath the skin, and then remove it from the inside.
Alpha Flight had this weird segmentation when it came to most of the Marvel Universe. They handle things specifically within Canada for the most part.
Oh, so they're just snobby and don't play well with others, huh?
I think this may have been a governmental problem. We are talking about a government super team, after all.
I'm just saying.
Here's the thing, though. Madison actually came up with a solution. He had an alien weapon that was recovered during an invasion of Toronto by this unknown race. Madison modified it, which was able to perform the necessary biopsy.
You say Toronto was invaded.
I know.
I'm just imagining big mooses with enormous laser guns.
It is hard to skip the stereotypes of the police like suddenly grabbing a bunch of hockey equipment, donning masks, and just rushing out to whack things.
just you say Toronto was invaded. There's these massive mooses with
Hey, you have never heard Strange Joy until you've heard this song Taranton by Word Burglar. Think of a tauntaun that wears a hockey jersey.
Oh my gosh.
But anyway, now that Madison could perform the biopsy, they found out, thankfully, that the cyst was benign.
Good.
Not long after this, Madison and Diamond Lil actually married, and they retired from active duty. They were not seen again until the Infinity Crusade.
Wow.
I take it you know that storyline?
Vaguely, just WoW was like a blast from the past.
Okay, the Infinity Crusade is one of those things that was spun eventually out of the Infinity Gauntlet. We all know the story where Thanos first brought together the 6 powerful gems to create a tool that could rewrite reality.
Yep.
Yeah.
After that, it was the Infinity War, where, if I remember correctly, someone started to manifest like a bunch of evil versions of Earth heroes. I think it was the Magus who got his hands on the Infinity Gauntlet. The Magus was generated when Adam Warlock, during the original Infinity Gauntlet storyline, was trying to become worthy of using the Infinity Gauntlet, and unfortunately unconsciously expelled both his most evil and most virtuous thoughts, and they became manifest. Mm-hmm. The Magus became the evil thoughts. The Infinity Crusade came into it when the Magus' positive thoughts reformed into the physical entity known as the Goddess and tried to spread universal harmony by any means necessary.
Harmony by force?
Yes. Think of it this way. The Goddess had the ability to create extreme euphoria in people. And when certain people felt that, they were compelled to follow the Goddess in this almost cult-like fashion, which caused them to fight any other heroes who came up to dispute this notion.
Naturally.
Yeah. After the Infinity Crusade, Alpha Flight was disbanded again by the Canadian government. So Alpha Flight was reactivated when another version of James Hudson, who was strangely younger, became the leader of the team. And Diamond Lil did not like the fact that Madison Jeffries volunteered to rejoin Alpha Flight. Lil just wanted a normal life with her husband. Mm-hmm. And I guess Madison just wasn't wired for that. Except this time, Madison did not bring the box robot with him. Madison went as Madison. Which turned out to be a bit of an error, because on the first mission of this new Alpha Flight, the criminal organization called the Zodiac, 12 people who are dressed up like different versions of, or different avatars of the Zodiac, they kidnapped Madison and brainwashed him. They made him become the new version of Gemini.
Oh, okay.
Except, Gemini is the classic symbol of twins or two.
Twins.
Yeah, the other part of Gemini was a modified box robot.
Of course. They always have to bring that back.
Yeah. Meanwhile, since Madison wasn't there to keep track of his wife, Diamond Lil was kidnapped by a new version of Department H, which started to experiment on her.
Oh.
Yeah. All these events were eventually rectified. Madison was rescued, Lil was rescued, but after that, Lil was kidnapped again. Except it wasn't by Department H for once.
Wow.
She was kidnapped by the new Weapon X program.
Oh, of course.
Even worse.
Oh, no, it's actually worse than you think, because she wasn't taken to be turned into a soldier. They took her to the Neverland camp, which was the Weapon X equivalent of a death camp for mutants, like Nuremberg.
Ooh.
Oh.
Yeah. Madison was also kidnapped by Weapon X, except he wasn't put into Neverland. He was brainwashed again and forcibly conscripted by Malcolm Colcord, who's running Weapon X. Madison's... The tortured Madison was actually the one who came up with the design for the Neverland camps.
Yikes.
Yeah. And Madison was frequently traumatized to keep him loyal to Colcord.
And brainwashed.
Eventually, in this version of Weapon X, there was a divide between Colcord and Brent Jackson, who was the field leader of the Weapon X teams. I mean, they're not going to put a mutant in charge of mutant soldiers, right? Brent Jackson got himself a group of followers, and he wanted to usurp power from Colcord. And in the middle of it all, Jeffries actually saved Malcolm Colcord's life and helped Colcord and one of his top lieutenants, Aurora, another Alpha Flight member, escape to safety. Even though Colcord was always really, really abusive. Jeffries wasn't seen for a little while after that, except he was one of the mutants who retained his powers after the decimation. He was not subject to the No More Mutants. Eventually, Jeffries is approached by Beast to be part of another support role for the X-Men. He wanted him to be part of the X-Club. The X-Club is a group of scientists of varying degrees that was supposed to help the X-Men just maintain themselves, since they so often end up cut off from regular means of support. The Avengers don't tend to help the X-Men. The Fantastic Four, they're friendly, but they don't exactly come to call. So the X-Men wanted their own group of scientists that were able to assist them. This included Kavita Rao, who created the original Hope, pseudo-cure for mutant powers, and Dr. Nemesis, a known geneticist who'd been hunting Nazis since World War II. Jeffrey said he wanted to get away from people because people kept tending to brainwash him.
Yeah.
So he tried to move away from all that. He just wanted to design and become more intelligent. He created robots that eventually self-replicated to the point where they didn't even need him to work on them anymore.
Machines building machines?
Yeah, eventually they decided they didn't need Jeffries at all. As Beast was trying to recruit him, Jeffries was on the run from all these various like box-style robots to the point where he eventually ran out the door, threw a bomb behind him, and sealed it shut.
Yikes.
And it's at that point where he just said, you know what, I could use some time away. Sure, I'll join the X Club.
Sign me up. Get me out of here.
Yeah.
Please and thanks.
So, there was a meeting of the X Club, and Beast explains everything about how the decimation occurred and how mutants lost their abilities across the planet.
Mm.
And, wow. Madison Jeffries helps go back in time to the year 1906 along with the rest of the X Club on an adventure, as well as Psylocke, and I'm sure having the British woman trapped in a Japanese woman's body along with a bunch of geeky scientists must have been a great time for her.
Awkward.
And Jeffries' abilities also helped raise Asteroid M from the bottom of the ocean, which eventually became Utopia, the island that the X-Men use as a base in the San Francisco Bay. As a matter of fact, Madison even got into fights himself during this period. While Norman Osborn was trying to forcibly conscript the X-Men into government service, Madison Jeffries teamed up with Dr. Nemesis and Psylocke to take on the Dark Beast directly. Unfortunately, things were not all good for Jeffries during this period. The Necrotia event happened. This is when Selene, the Black Queen of the Hellfire Club, was resurrecting mutants across the world so that she could eventually feed on their energies.
Mm.
And unfortunately, part of this event, Diamond Lil went up against Dazzler's sister, Mortis. Mortis projects a sort of death field. And unfortunately, it's one of the few things that could get through Diamond Lil's unbreakable skin.
Of course.
He was so broken up by the loss of Lil, he actually used his transmutation abilities to create a glass coffin for her.
Oh, it's Snow White.
Yeah, they buried her at sea. And Madison Jeffries and the X Club are also in the events of the Second Coming, when Hope Summers was revealed as the first new mutant since the decimation. They're shut out of Utopia by Bastion, the Nimrod Sentinel masquerading as a man.
Mm-hmm.
After this, Madison Jeffries appears as a member of the Utopian community next to Elixir, Karma, Mask, Random, and Tabitha Smith, a.k.a. Boom Boom. He also developed a strange attraction to the the humanoid manifestation of the Danger Room that simply called herself Danger. Madison's dating life is bizarre. I don't know, maybe he was just tired of humans to the point where he just felt like dating a robot would be fine. Danger was always one of the creepier stories to me because she was basically an advanced AI that Xavier, during his more manipulative periods, enslaved to become the center of the Danger Room. And after the new X-Men storyline where he'd been gone for a significant amount of time, basically the controls on the Danger Room AI kept breaking down further and further to the point where the Danger Room just wanted to be free.
Uh-oh.
And it eventually developed its own body and its own personality, hence Danger.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the Danger character in a while, not since a short run on X-Force. She started out looking very dangerous. It seemed like she wanted to kill mutants everywhere, but all she could ever do, at her worst, while she was trapped anyway, was convince one mutant to commit suicide. She couldn't actually harm mutants because some of the controls and safety measures of the Danger Room were still active while she was trapped in it. It's rather strange. But, yeah, that's about the end of Madison Jeffries' history, and I don't recall him being a part of any of the current X-Men series since Krakoa.
I have neither.
I mean, his abilities are immense when you think about it. The ability to transmute and shape any or inorganic matter.
There's a lot of potential in that.
The guy could...
Mm-hmm.
There's so many potential uses for that ability. I mean, he could create housing for the planet if he really felt like it. It would just be a case of time. But even, you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if he was responsible for some of the strange structures that propped up around Krakoa. Somebody was building there during the period while Magneto and Xavier were gathering the mutants to the island. Well, remember, in the House of X, when they showed the flashback when they recruited the White Queen, there was already a number of structures on that island. And they don't look organically grown. But, yeah, I hope you guys feel like you learned something. What do you think of Madison Jeffries?
I
Very
learned a lot.
drama and convoluted.
And angst.
Yeah.
If he ever learned how to physically fight with his own two hands and his abilities, he could be a very dangerous individual.
Won't.
Well, I mean, it just occurred to me, if somebody attacks him with a sword, if his reaction time is fast enough, that sword would practically melt away like butter as soon as you tried to stab him.
The thing is, he can easily handle any sentinel. Or pretty much any sentinel.
Yeah, his original powers were, like I said, the ability to transmute metals, but in later versions he was gaining a secondary mutation of full-on technopathy. He could talk to AIs and robotics as easily as, you and I speak.
Wow.
I was surprised to hear more about this character because he seems like their answer to the sentinel problem.
Right?
Potentially. I mean, his mental difficulties do make a couple of issues, though. I'm not sure you'd want him to have a long conversation with, say, a Nimrod.
Mm-hmm.
He would have to actually deal with it directly. And the new version of Nimrods in the House of X, I'm still trying to decide how organic or inorganic they are. It seems like the first one is going to be based on that security chief that died during the Dawn of X minis.
Mm-hmm.
But I still don't know how much of him may be in there. I don't know if there's an organic core at this first Nimrod. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So I'm still trying to figure all that out. But yeah, Madison has a lot of potential. He's not a frontliner.
Definitely. Yeah, support character. You gotta have them too.
Yeah, true enough. And like you guys were saying, he could have a number of roles in just about anything he really decided to do. It feels like in the history of this character, he's never had a specific thing he's decided. He fell in love with women that were more or less convenient to him. His familial relationships are garbage. And it seems like every time he's about to settle down to something, somebody grabs him, scrambles his brain, and sends him out.
Gee, nice of them.
Well, comic books.
Mm-hmm.
I hear you about to start something there, Jesse.
I just think that if someone with a good thought to settle down with this character and just work with it, he could be something pretty awesome.
You know what? It just occurred to me. He could be a great partner for Forge.
Oh no!
The two of them would create something huge.
Yeah, like bigger than the Sentinels.
Conceivably, yeah. And with all the
Yeah.
knowledge he gained from Roger Boggs, it could be completely autonomous, whatever they make.
Oh, they could probably make their own sentinels.
Wouldn't that be something if Sentinels suddenly attack Krakoa and then they're met by a Gundam?
That's basically what they are.
But that's for writers to figure out. I'm not that bright.
Mm-hmm.
We had a little bit of a talk at the end of the last show. It wasn't recorded anyway, but we were trying to figure out other characters to eventually talk about. And one of the standouts that we kind of decided on was Omega Red.
Yeah.
He is the central villain of the first arc of the new Wolverine series, and considering the indications, I don't know. I get this feeling that he may pop up in the MCU fairly soon, the cinematic universe.
He has the potential to be a very great antagonist for them to deal with.
Well, it's also just Kevin Feige making very strong indications that mutants are coming, if not in this phase, very soon in the next one of Marvel's movies.
If the rumors I hear are to be believed, they're kind of drip feeding him in other projects.
That's what it seems to be. However, you won't know that till it comes, and it seems to me that those types of appearances would be the first things to hit the cutting room floor if some suit decides it doesn't work. But we shall see. So are you guys okay with discussing a little bit of Omega Red next week?
Sure.
All right. Well, thank you very much for tuning in. I hope everybody feels like they learned something. And for those of you that are out there dealing with different phases of this coronavirus or COVID-19, I wish you all the best. I really do. This is a very strange time for the planet. I almost expect to hear about a strange number of people with this virus suddenly developing superpowers. I'm not that lucky, though.
Right.
Never have been. But everybody stay well out there. Thanks again. I am Jeremy.
I'm Joanna.
And I am Jesse.
and you have just been expertly informed.
This podcast is part of the Second Union Podcast Network. You can listen, like, and subscribe to all our podcasts by heading over to wearesecondunion.com. Thank you for listening.